I built my first greenhouse with borrowed money and a handshake loan from a man named Earl Hutchins, who believed in me when no bank would. That was the spring of 1986, on a half-acre plot outside of Greenville, South Carolina, with soil so stubborn it cracked my first set of shovels before I ever turned a profit. By the time I was 64 years old, Mercer Garden Supply had 7 locations across 3 states, a full-time staff of 81 people, and a reputation I'd spent nearly 4 decades building one customer, one season, one hard decision at a time. I want you to understand that before I tell you what happened on the night of March 14th, because what I heard that night would have meant nothing, absolutely nothing, if I hadn't spent my whole life pouring everything I had into something I believed in. When you build something from the ground up with your own 2 hands, it doesn't just become a business. It becomes part of who you are. Every crack in every wall, every early morning, every winter when I wasn't sure we'd make payroll, it all lives inside you somewhere. You carry it, and you keep going. My son, my only son, had been working alongside me for 11 years. I brought him in at 26, fresh out of a business degree he'd barely squeaked through, and I didn't hand him anything easy. He started in the stockroom at our Greenville flagship, learning how we receive inventory, how we treat vendors, how we talk to the hourly workers who show up at 6 in the morning, whether it's raining or not. I was proud of the way he took to it, at first. He learned fast. He smiled at the right people. He shook hands like he meant it. Over the years, I moved him up the way I'd planned. Assistant manager at 28, store manager at 31, regional coordinator at 34. By the time he was 37, he was running our entire South Carolina operations, overseeing 3 locations, and sitting in on our quarterly meetings like a man who understood that everything we had came from discipline and sacrifice. I told myself the small things I noticed were just generational. The way he'd get frustrated when a vendor called with a problem on a Friday afternoon, the eye roll he thought I didn't see when I talked about the early years. The way he'd sometimes speak to the younger stockroom employees, not cruelly, nothing I could point to directly, but with a kind of impatience that made me uneasy. I told myself I was being too hard on him. I told myself every father sees things in his son that aren't really there, shadows of his own fears. I pushed it down. I focused on what was working. I had been planning my retirement for 2 years. Not because I was tired, I still loved the work, but because I believed that if I didn't step aside, I'd be the kind of man who held on too long, who let his ego strangle the thing he'd built. I'd watched other business owners do it. I swore I never would. The plan was this. On April 1st, I would officially transfer operational control of Mercer Garden Supply to my son at a private dinner with our senior staff, our accountant, and our 2 longest-serving managers. I would stay on in an advisory capacity for 12 months. Then I would let go completely. I had already had the paperwork drawn up. I had already spoken to my attorney. I had already written a letter to every one of our 81 employees, thanking them for being part of something that mattered. The night of March 14th, 17 days before the handover, I came downstairs around 11 o'clock because I couldn't sleep. That happens to me sometimes. I've got a bad hip from too many years on concrete floors, and some nights it just keeps me awake, no matter what I do. I came down to get a glass of water and maybe sit on the back porch for a while. My son had come over for dinner that evening. He and his wife live about 12 minutes from me, and we'd had a normal night pot roast. Some talk about the transition. His wife showing me photos on her phone from a weekend trip they'd taken. He'd left around 9. Or I thought he had. As I came through the hallway toward the kitchen, I heard his voice. He was standing in the doorway of my study, his back to me, phone pressed to his ear. He'd come back in, I realized. He must have forgotten something. The door to the study was half open, and he hadn't heard me on the stairs. I stopped walking. No, I'm telling you. It's basically done, he was saying. Clodagh. The tone of his voice was something I had never heard before. It was loose, easy, almost amused, like a man who had won something. 17 more days and the whole thing's mine, all 7 locations. The old man spent 40 years building it, so I don't have to. I stood in that hallway and I did not move. He thinks this is a partnership, my son said. He thinks I'm going to keep all his people, keep all his little traditions, keep sending birthday cards to vendors like it's 1,995. He laughed. A real laugh. He has no idea. The second those papers are signed, I'm cutting the dead weight. Starting with those two old managers he's so attached to. Sentimental. I heard the person on the other end say something. Yeah, he's happy, my son said. He's proud of me. He keeps saying I've earned this. Another laugh, quieter this time. Easiest thing I ever did. I stood there until I heard him say goodbye and pocket his phone. Then I stepped backward, silently, and sat down on the bottom stair in the dark. I heard him pick something up from the desk, his jacket, I think, and walk back through the kitchen and out the side door. I heard his car start. I heard it pull away. I sat on that stair for a long time. I want to be honest with you about what I felt in those first minutes, because it wasn't what you might expect. It wasn't rage. It was something quieter and much worse than rage. It was the specific grief of a man who realizes he has been loving a version of his son that may not have existed or may have existed once and been replaced, slowly and without his noticing, by something else entirely. I thought about every conversation we'd had about the business. Every time I'd pulled him aside and said, "This is important, write it down." Every time he'd nodded and said, "I know, Dad. I understand." I thought about Earl Hutchins, who believed in me when I had nothing. I thought about Sandra Wills, who has run our Greenville stockroom for 22 years and who cried the day I told her we were expanding to a third location because she said it meant her job was safe. I thought about every single person whose livelihood was tied to what I had built. I went to bed. I did not sleep. The next morning, I called my attorney before 8 o'clock. I told him to pause everything. No transfer documents, no signatures, nothing until he heard from me. He asked if everything was all right. I told him it would be. Then I made myself a cup of coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and I thought for a very long time about what kind of man I was going to be. I could have called my son that morning and told him what I'd heard. I could have ended it right there. No handover, no nothing, just done. Part of me wanted to, but I kept thinking about something my own father told me once. When I was young and had made a bad mistake at the hardware store where I worked, he didn't fire me. He didn't shame me. He sat me down and he said, "Boy, the measure of a man isn't whether he falls. It's what he does when you put the weight in front of him and see if he can carry it." I never forgot that. I thought about it my whole life. My son had never been given real weight to carry. I realized, sitting at that kitchen table, that I had made it easy for him. I had moved him up, yes. I had given him responsibility, yes. But I had also always been there. I had always been the net beneath him. He had never truly had to stand in a doorway at 3 a.m, wondering if he'd made the right call, with nobody to ask, no one to bail him out. He had never had to be the one. I had built him a ramp when he needed a cliff. That was on me, too. I called him the next day and told him we needed to talk. We met at the Greenville store, in my office, with the door closed. He came in smiling, a coffee in each hand, the way he always did when he came to see me at work. He set one in front of me and settled into the chair across the desk like a man with no worries in the world. I looked at my son for a long moment before I spoke. I studied his face, the face I had watched grow from an infant's face into this one, and I tried to understand how I had missed what was underneath it. Maybe I hadn't missed it. Maybe I had seen it and refused to look. "I'm making a change to the transition plan," I said. Something moved behind his eyes. A small thing. What kind of change? I told him I had been thinking about what it would mean to truly hand over the business. Not just legally, not just on paper. I told him that a business like ours didn't run on paperwork, it ran on relationships, on judgment, on knowing when to push and when to hold. And I told him I wasn't convinced, after thinking hard about it, that 11 years of working alongside me had taught him what he would need to know when I was no longer there. "So here is what I'm proposing," I said. I had written it out the night before. I slid the paper across the desk to him. He picked it up and read it. His expression changed as he read. The proposal was this. For the next 12 months, beginning April 1st, he would take sole operational control of our two smallest locations, the one in Spartanburg and the one in Anderson. Not with me advising, not with me available by phone for every question, alone. He would be responsible for all hiring and firing decisions at those locations, all vendor relationships, all quarterly targets. And those targets were specific. Maintain current retention for the hourly staff, grow revenue by at least 4%, and receive no formal complaints from the two senior managers he'd be working alongside. After 12 months, if all three conditions were met, the full transfer would proceed. He set the paper down. 12 months, he said. 12 months. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You've been planning this for 2 years. The handover is in 17 days. Everything is arranged." "I've spoken to my attorney," I said. "The arrangement can wait, Dad." His voice shifted. Something harder came into it. "I've given you 11 years. I know this business. Then proving it in 12 months should be straightforward." He leaned back. He looked at me the way a person looks at someone when they are deciding how much they can say. "Is this because of something I did? Did someone say something to you?" "This is because I need to know the business is in the right hands," I said. "That's the only reason." He stood up. He picked up his coffee. "And if I say no?" I held his eyes. "Then on April 1st, instead of a transition, we have a different conversation about the future of Mercer Garden Supply." He left without finishing his coffee. For 3 days, I heard nothing from him. His wife called me on the second day. Not about business, just to chat, the way she sometimes does, and I could tell she was feeling something out without asking directly. I was warm with her. I always am. She has never been anything but kind to me. And whatever was happening between my son and me was not her fault. On the 4th day, my son came back to my office. He sat down in the same chair. No coffee this time. He looked like a man who hadn't been sleeping well. "I want to talk about the conditions," he said. "All right. The 4% growth target on Spartanburg and Anderson. Those are 2 of our softer locations. Last 2 years, they've been flat. 4% in 12 months on flat locations is aggressive." He was right. I had known that when I wrote it. "Then you'll have to work harder than you have been," I said. He flinched slightly. Just slightly. "The staff retention condition," he said. "Current retention at those 2 locations is already above average. Maintaining it depends on variables. I can't fully control. People leave. People have life circumstances. You can control how you treat them," I said. "You can control whether they want to stay." He was quiet. "The senior manager condition," he said. And he stopped there. "What about it?" He looked at his hands for a moment. "Sandra and Frank have been here a long time. They have their ways of doing things." "Yes," I said. "They do, because their ways work." He nodded slowly. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said something I did not expect. "Were you always going to do this?" he asked. "Or did something change?" I looked at my son. I had asked myself many times in those 4 days whether I was going to tell him what I heard. I had gone back and forth on it, but sitting there looking at him, I made my decision. "I came downstairs on the night of March 14th, I said, "because my hip was keeping me awake. You had come back inside. You were on the phone in my study." The color left his face completely. I watched it happen. I watched him understand. In the space of about 3 seconds, everything that had shifted between us. He opened his mouth and then he closed it. He looked away. "I heard what you said about the business," I said. "About the staff. About me." He said nothing. "I want you to know," I said, keeping my voice even, "that I didn't make this decision in anger. I'm not trying to punish you. I'm trying to give you the chance to show me and to show yourself who you actually are when you have to be the one. Because what I heard that night told me you had never really been tested. And some of that is my fault. I made things too easy for you. I should have put more weight on you sooner." He was looking at the surface of my desk. His jaw was tight. "But I also need you to understand what you said about Sandra and Frank," I said. "Sandra Wills has worked for this company for 22 years. Frank Delaney for 18. They have children. They have mortgages. They have given this company the best years of their working lives. What you said about them, dead weight, sentimental, I need you to sit with that. I need you to think about the kind of leader you would be if you walked in there on April 2nd and started making decisions based on that thinking." He still wasn't looking at me. "So," I said, "what do you want to do?" The silence stretched out. Then my son said very quietly, "I'll do the 12 months. He looked up at me then. His eyes were red at the edges. "I'm sorry, Dad. What you heard, I was talking to someone who it doesn't matter. It was a side of me that I'm not proud of. I don't know what to say to you right now." "You don't need to say anything else right now," I said. "The 12 months will say it." He nodded. He stood up. At the door he paused. The people on that call, I was performing for them, a little, trying to sound like someone I'm not. He stopped, but I was saying it. That's still true. I said it. Yes, I said. You did. He left. I sat in my office for a while after that and looked out the window at the parking lot where two of our delivery trucks were parked with Mercer Garden Supply written on the side in the dark green letters I had chosen myself in. 1991. I thought about Earl Hutchins again. I thought about what it meant to be believed in. April 1st came and went quietly. No dinner, no ceremony. My attorney filed the amended documents. My son got the keys, metaphorically speaking, to Spartanburg and Anderson. The first 3 months were rough, and I heard about it through Sandra, who keeps me informed on the things that matter. My son made some early decisions that created friction. He pushed for a new inventory system without consulting the staff who would actually use it, and there was pushback. He had a bad week in June where 2 employees gave notice, and he panicked and called me at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night. I answered. I always answered, but I didn't give him the answer. I asked him questions. What do you think is driving the turnover? What have you said to those employees when they've raised concerns? What would you do differently if you started this month over? I kept asking until he started answering his own questions. Then I said goodnight. By August, something had shifted. Sandra called me and said, I don't know what you said to that boy, but he's starting to actually listen. She told me he had sat down with the full staff at Anderson for an hour-long meeting where he did nothing but ask questions and take notes. She told me he had remembered the birthday of one of the stockroom workers, a young man named Deshawn who had been with us for 3 years and had brought a cake. She told me he had called a vendor at 7 in the morning to resolve a delivery issue before it became a problem for the store. He's starting to sound like you, she said, just younger and better looking. I laughed at that. First real laugh I'd had in a while. In September, he called me himself to tell me that Anderson was up 2.1% year over year. Not 4%, but movement, real movement. He sounded different on that call. Not the easy, loose confidence I had heard in my hallway in March. This was quieter. The kind of confidence that comes from having done something hard and found out you could. It's not 4 yet, he said. It's September, I said. I know. I'm going to get there. A pause. Sandra and I have been talking about a fall promotion for the holiday planting season. She has an idea about partnering with the neighborhood associations in the area for community garden events. I think it's good. I think Sandra's ideas are almost always good, I said. Yeah, he said. I know that now. December came. I sat down with my accountant and my attorney on the 28th of the month to go over the numbers. Spartanburg had finished the year up 3.8%. Anderson was up 4.6%. Combined, the 2 locations had exceeded the target. Staff retention at both locations was the highest it had been in 4 years. There had been no formal complaints from either Sandra or Frank. My son did not know I was having that meeting. I hadn't told him when I'd be reviewing the results. I called him that evening. It was a Thursday night. I could hear his wife in the background, some cooking sound, the small, ordinary noise of his life. Are you sitting down? I asked. A pause. Should I be? Anderson finished at 4.6, I said. Spartanburg at 3.8, both above target, combined. Silence on his end. Retention is up, I said. No complaints. You met all 3 conditions. I heard him exhale. A long, slow exhale. The kind a person lets out when they have been holding their breath for 9 months. Dad, he said. His voice cracked on the word. Just slightly. I want to have dinner, I said. Just the 2 of us. This weekend, if you can. We met at a restaurant in Greenville that we used to go to when he was in high school. A steakhouse on Augusta Road that has been there since before he was born. We got a corner table. We ordered what we always order. For the first part of dinner, we talked about ordinary things, his wife, a trip they were planning, the Clemson season, the way you ease into the real conversation by walking around the outside of it first. Then he set down his fork and looked at me. I want to tell you something, he said, and I need you to let me finish before you say anything. All right. He took a breath. What you heard me say that night in your study, I've thought about it every single day since then, not because I got caught, because I've been inside those 2 stores for 9 months now, and I know every one of those people. I know that Deshawn is saving money to go back to school. I know that the woman who runs the register at Spartanburg on weekday mornings is taking care of her mother. I know that Frank Delaney cried at his wife's retirement party last spring and talks about their grandkids every time I see him. He stopped. He looked down at his plate for a moment. I was going to walk into those stores and treat them like numbers on a spreadsheet, he said. I was going to cut them. I said they were dead weight. I said it out loud. He shook his head. I had no idea what it took to build what you built. I said I did. I thought I did. I didn't. I didn't say anything yet. He'd asked me to wait. You could have told me what you heard that night and ended everything, he said. I would have deserved that. But you didn't. You gave me the chance to actually learn what I should have learned a long time ago. And I know that cost you something. The trust you had in me, before I know that's not the same thing it was. I don't expect it to be. He looked up at me. I don't know if I can fully earn back what I lost with you, he said, but I'm going to spend a long time trying. I let that sit between us for a moment. Outside, Augusta Road moved the way it always does in December. Headlights and holiday lights and people living their lives. I owe you something honest, too, I said. I made it too easy for you for too long. I told myself I was investing in you, but part of it was pride. I wanted to be the man who built something and handed it to his son. I wanted that story. And wanting that story made me blind to things I should have seen earlier. That's on me. You heard it eventually, he said. I should have created the conditions to see it earlier, I said. Before you ever got on that phone call, you needed real weight on your shoulders years ago. I kept carrying it for you. He was quiet. Then, slowly, he nodded. So what happens now? He said. Now I sign the papers, I said. The real ones, all 7 locations. April 1st, 1 year from when we started. Something moved across his face, relief, gratitude, and something else I recognized because I have felt it myself. The look of a person who has been given something that now actually means something because of what it cost to get there. Sandra and Frank stay, he said. It was not a question. Sandra and Frank stay, I confirmed. And you treat every person in those buildings the way I tried to show you. Not because I'm watching, because it's right. I know, he said. I know that now. We finished dinner. We split a piece of apple pie the way we used to when he was young, and I'd bring him here after a good report card, the same fork, 2 bites each, taking turns. Outside, we stood on the sidewalk for a moment in the cold December air. Dad, he said. Yeah, thank you for not giving up on me. I looked at my son who had disappointed me in ways I hadn't known a person could be disappointed, and who had, in 9 hard months, started to become the man I had always believed was in there somewhere. I thought about Earl Hutchins. I thought about my own father saying the measure of a man isn't whether he falls. I thought about 81 people who showed up every morning to a company I had built, and who deserved a leader who understood what they were worth. Don't make me regret it, I said. He smiled. I won't. I believed him. Not blindly, the way I had believed him before, but the way you believe a person who has looked you in the eye after carrying something heavy and shown you what they're made of. That's a different kind of belief. It's earned. It means something. I drove home on the familiar roads, past the exits I have taken thousands of times, and I thought about the spring of 1,986.5-acre plot and borrowed money and a man who believed in me. I thought about all the springs after that, each one a little further from where I started. I thought about what it would mean to truly let go, not in grief, not in defeat, but as a man who had built something real and found, in the end, someone worthy of carrying it forward. That felt like enough. That felt like more than enough. If you've ever built something from nothing, a business, a home, a family, you know that the hardest part isn't the building. The hardest part is knowing when to open your hands, not because you're tired, not because you've given up, but because you trust. And sometimes that trust has to be tested before it can be true. I'm 65 years old. Come April, I'll hand over the keys to everything I have spent my life building. I will do it with both hands open and my eyes clear. And if you find yourself in a situation like mine, if you've heard something that shattered a version of someone you loved, if you're sitting in the dark trying to figure out what kind of man or woman you're going to be in response to it, I hope you'll consider giving the weight before you give the verdict. Not because people always deserve it, but because sometimes the weight is the only thing that shows them, and you, who they really are. Don't forget to subscribe for more real stories about family, business, and the complicated grace of learning to trust again. If this story meant something to you, leave a comment below. I read everyone. And if someone in your life needs to hear this today, share it with them, because none of us builds anything worth having alone.